How you doing, folks? Before I get started with this one, I want to thank for all y'all that watch these videos. And I know the sound quality absolutely sucks. I've got a new microphone on the way. Actually, I'm in the process of building a whole studio. So maybe somewhere in the future we can get rid of the slideshow. And I can scare y'all real good with my ugly mug. Once I get this studio built. Or set up, not really built. But I want to get this channel off the ground and get started. And this whole YouTube thing's a big learning process. I mean, there's learning in presentation. There's learning in finding subjects to talk about. There's big learning in all the editing and stuff and actually getting the videos onto YouTube. I'm just taking it one step at a time. There'll probably come a day where these videos will probably not even be on the channel anymore. Or they'll be redone in a much higher quality. But like I say, I'd like to thank you once again for showing some patience. But we'll get into this next story. This next story comes to you from the Federalist. It's a kind of a tongue-in-cheek thing, but if you really listen to the left wing, it's kind of what they're telling you. And we all know it'd be a real, real bad day in this country if one party or the other just completely took over. Because that's, I guess by definition, totalitarianism. We don't need to go there. Well, let's get into this article. This article's from the Federalist. Just released today. And the title is Democrats, the only way to save our democracy is one party rule. And the subheadline is Save Our Democracy is the new Russia collusion. And here's the article. At this point, it would save everyone time if Democrats would simply point to a policy agenda item that isn't going to save our democracy, if such a thing exists. If Republicans vote, they're killing democracy. If they don't vote, they're killing democracy. The only way to save democracy, writes the Washington Post Max Boot, is to empower one-party rule. A position that probably sounds counterintuitive to anyone with a middle school education. Now you need to vote to literally save our democracy again, contends Joe Biden, or we will lose our fundamental rights and freedoms like the right to choose, the right to privacy, the right to vote, our very democracy. Chilling stuff, but it doesn't end there. You will remember by failing to reform the filibuster, which would entail authorizing the thinnest of fleeting majorities to shove through massive generational reforms without any national consensus or debate. We are also killing democracy. This has been the position not only of left-wing pundits and the New York Times editorial board, but also senators tasked with defending their institution. I wonder if they will support this democracy-saving fix next session as well. Then again, if we don't nationalize the economy to avert a climate crisis, we're also killing democracy. If we got to save democracy in order to save our species, Jamie Raskin explains, if we don't empty the Strategic Petroleum Reserve to temporarily keep gas prices low to help Democrats win in 2022, we're killing democracy. If we find ourselves in a situation where keeping gas prices low is key to preserving and strengthening the future of our democracy, MSNBC's Chris Hayes says. We must allow the president to unilaterally create trillion-dollar spending bills and break existing private sector contracts by fiat for democracy. We must pack the court to save democracy. We must create a ministry of truth to help with strengthening democratic institutions. We must also vote for a Pennsylvania candidate who can't cobble two consecutive coherent sentences together because the fate of our democracy is at stake, says our former president. If you don't support a partisan congressional investigation that circumvented basic due process norms, you probably hate democracy. If you aren't a self-flagellating and holding yourself accountable for the actions of January 6 rioters, you're also bolstering the coming autocracy. If the Freedom Court empowers the public to vote on an issue like abortion, unmentioned anywhere in the Constitution, it's degrading our democracy. If the court protects rights that are explicitly mentioned in the Constitution from the vagaries of the political process, it is also undermining democracy, which is convenient. The only way to save democracy is to allow one party, guess which one, to federalize elections so they compel states to count mail-in votes that arrive 10 days late, legalize ballot harvesting, force the overturning of dozens of existing voter ID laws, allow felons to vote, create onerous burdens to chill speech, and empower bureaucrats to redraw congressional districts. Otherwise, well, you know. You'll remember last year when left-wingers were arguing that Mike Pence's support for basic voting ID, backed by around 80% of the American public and implemented in virtually every free nation, heralded a permanent authoritarian rule. The president called Georgia's moderate voter law odious, pernicious, vicious, unconscionable, a subversion and a suppression of the 21st century Jim Crow, and a sign of emerging autocracy. In 2022, early voting in Georgia is shattering records. Then, of course, there are the nefarious election deniers. You know, the big lie. If Democrats believed election denial was an existential threat to American democracy, they probably wouldn't be parentally engaging in it. The American left hasn't accepted the legitimacy of a Republican presidential election win since 1988. Democrats saved democracy by pumping millions into primary campaigns of election-denying Republicans to try to set up a more favorable general election. Just last night, Hillary Clinton, one of the numerous prominent Democrats who wouldn't accept the legitimacy of the 2016 presidential election, claimed that right-wing extremists already have a plan to literally steal the next presidential election. This is the kind of preemptive election denialism Democrats have been engaged in for nearly 2 decades. Democrats don't lose elections. They are victims of gerrymandering or voter suppression or structural problems or too much free speech or Fox News or Russian gremlins. Beginning in 2016, the Democratic Party descended into the politics of hystericism. It began with a mind-bending tale of a second-rate power stealing our democracy with a few Facebook ads and a Manchurian candidate. The collective psychotic break that followed was bolstered by an unethical political media and a corrupt investigation into the president that was predicted on an opposition research document filled with fictions, distortions, and Russian disinformation. Democrats wanted to cripple the president. They succeeded. Since then, the large swath of the left has become so reliant on infantile fear-mongering that they seem incapable of debating any issues or dealing with the reality of an opposition party. When they're not slandering political opponents as semi-fascists, or racist, or misogynists, or homophobes, or transphobes, or death cultists, they're engaging in cloistered, pseudo-intellectual debate club discussions on saving democracy. Democrats, who have spent years delegitimizing the Supreme Court of law, undermining legislative norms, cheering on unprecedented and blatant executive abuses, and using the DOJ to target their political enemies, among other democracy-destroying behaviors, do not occupy any high moral ground. And while democracy is once just a transparently silly euphemism for stuff we want, it has since evolved in a rhetorical device that denotes a decisively illiberal mindset. I'm probably going to butcher this guy's name, but this article was written by David Orsani, and he's spot on. He just it it it's why when I watch the major networks, I almost cackle with laughter, and because it's so obvious what they're doing. But you know the bad thing is, I ain't gonna say dumbass people because no, they're not dumb. They're very uninformed or misinformed people that fall for this stuff. You remember back in the when the George Floyd riots were happening and the word racist was thrown around? I mean, you turn on an average newscast, and an hour of an average newscast, you hear the word racist 150 times. And it wore out the word so bad that it just really doesn't hold the punch that it used to. Are there still racists? Oh, yeah. But bad as I hate to say it, that's kind of the price of living in a free society. People are allowed free thought. And as long as you want to be free, there's going to be negativities to that freedom. And the goal is that the positivities, the positives, far outweigh the negatives. Now the word for the last 2 years has been fascists. And half the blowhards on MSNBC that drop this word 3 times a sentence, if you could ever pin them to the wall, and tell them define fascist, 3/4 or 80% of them couldn't do it. Have no idea what a fascist is. It's funny when they say that, we're Nazis. Well, anybody knows anything about history knows that Nazi was an abbreviation, or a nickname really, for the National Socialist Party in Germany. See, that's what socialism is socialism is all about control. If you ever watch, or you're reading history, and you watch Hitler up on that stage, and they always show the pictures of Hitler from like 1936 and on. They don't tell you nothing about Hitler from when he actually assumed power. And you think to yourself, how did that man convince a very large portion of the world to fight for him? How did he talk his countrymen into putting people in ovens to the tune of 6 million people? I'm going to let you in on a little secret, folks. You're watching how it starts. It starts with this one party rule crap. And the other party, anybody but them that's in politics, isn't a political opponent. They're evil. and they should be silenced. And if you ever let them have one party rule, I mean complete one party rule, won't be long, we'll have re education camps. Don't believe me? Look what happens to people now when they say the wrong thing. You can actually go to prison now for hate speech. Or about the other article I talked about yesterday, where the parents got their child taken away. Because they wouldn't agree to his gender choice. How much further than that? How much further do they have to go to start saying we need re-education? And they got to lock us up in a camp to give us re-education. It's not that far of a leap, folks. That's food for thought. And I hope you have a fine day.